Military races heating up around the globe, from submarines to land drills and even into the stars, featuring major players like China, Japan, Taiwan, and the U.S.
You have the pre-position capability.
What's the latest, and where does the U.S. stand in its race against Beijing? What do you think? Let us know below, and subscribe if you haven't already. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Before we dive into today's news, make sure to use the link down below to subscribe to our newsletter. Each week, we round up the highlights and controversies happening around China and the world, and share an exclusive behind-the-scenes snapshot with our readers. Keep an eye out. The newsletter will land in your inbox Friday morning. America is about to welcome a new top general, the Senate confirming Charles Brown as the next chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff on Wednesday. He's set to replace Mark Milley as the highest-ranking military officer in the U.S. Brown used to be an air component commander for U.S. Indo-Pacific Command.
Throughout, I will collaborate with the Department's civilian leadership, their agency, and with our allies and partners.
Brown didn't specifically outline a stance on China during his confirmation hearing in July, though he did answer lawmakers' questions about cyber threats from China, and he touched on the challenges of fighting a war in the Indo-Pacific versus Europe.
You cannot wait till the crisis occurs to be able to deploy capability. You have to pre-position capability and have that in place. You have to work with allies and partners to have access to locations so you can put capability into place.
He did raise red flags on an issue troubling the U.S. military. In a letter to American airmen this week, Brown warned that Beijing is looking to exploit their knowledge to fill gaps in its own development. That's by targeting and recruiting U.S. and NATO military talent to train Chinese troops. This problem has spread beyond U.S. military. Other members of the Five Eyes Intelligence Sharing Alliance, including Australia, the UK, and New Zealand, have taken steps to prevent former pilots from handing over know-how to Beijing. Last year, the UK said up to 30 former British pilots were providing training in China. A month later, Australia said it's conducting a review because of reports of Australian pilots doing training in China. A former U.S. fighter pilot has also been indicted over allegations he trained Chinese pilots on how to land on aircraft carriers. He denied the allegations. More on the military front, the U.S. Navy started reviving a spy program last year designed to counter submarine threats. According to people with direct knowledge of the plan, it's worth billions of dollars, sits on an island just 50 miles north of Seattle, and has the biggest monitoring range of any similar program since the end of the Cold War. What's driving the revival? In recent years, the Chinese military has been aggressive in trying to intimidate Taiwan. Beijing claims the island as its own and has not ruled out the use of force to take control of it. But how does the island play into U.S. national security? Taiwan sits on the first island chain, blocking China from accessing deep waters off its coast. Those waters would prove essential if Beijing wanted to launch and conceal armed submarines and attack the U.S. Back to the Navy's plan, the submarine spy program itself is top secret, designed to monitor the submarines of the former Soviet Union. Its first and only public appearance happened in 1991, at the end of the Cold War. The surveillance network can collect data through unmanned sea drones and underwater satellite sensors. North Korea launched its first tactical nuclear attack submarine earlier this month. It will patrol the waters between the Korean peninsula and Japan. What is the new vessel and what does its launch mean? Let's dive in.
In a speech at the sub's launch ceremony, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un said it would become one of the main, quote, underwater offensive means of the naval force. Analysts say the new vessel appears to be a modified Soviet-era Romeo-class submarine, which North Korea acquired from China in the 1970s and began producing domestically. Shin Sun-ki is a research fellow at the Korea Institute for Defense Analyses and says it is expected to carry tactical ballistic and cruise missiles, but may face limitations.
Because it has excessively modified the existing Romeo-class submarine, there may be some limitations in immediately operating it compared to the existing ones. It is likely that they will continue to develop it to a level where it can be operated at some point in the future.
Such weapons won't add much value to land-based nuclear forces, added former US government weapons expert Van Diepen, who works with Washington-based 38 North. That's because the aging submarine at the core of the design is relatively slow and noisy, with a limited range. Combined, these factors mean it may not survive long in a war, and would be vulnerable to anti-submarine warfare, he said.
Taiwan's first ever homemade submarine is on its way. Tests on the undersea vehicle start this month, after the island sunk $1.5 billion into the project. The Chinese Communist Party has repeatedly voiced plans to invade Taiwan by 2027. So before that clock runs out, the U.S. is preparing to help the democratic island. Here's what Eli Ratner, Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Indo-Pacific, said in a hearing earlier this week.
Conflict in the Taiwan Strait would be devastating. Taiwan is a thriving democracy that plays a vital role in the world economy, with high technology exports like semiconductors.
A similar message from the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Regional Security. She explained why U.S. support for Ukraine is also important for Taiwan.
That our support for Ukraine bolsters Ukraine's deterrence, but also bolsters Taiwan's deterrence. That where we can, we should be making sure that the PRC gets the right message from us, which is that we support our partners, we support our allies, and that we are a reliable partner.
And in Taiwan, drills are being held to practice defending a military base from a Chinese attack. The Thursday exercise simulates what would happen if intruders attack the base on the island's west coast. Just days ago, Beijing sent more than 100 warplanes to cross the Taiwan Strait within just 24 hours, setting a new record. The median line serves as an unofficial divider between China and Taiwan. But China's foreign ministry spokesperson said this week that there's no such thing because, according to Beijing, Taiwan is part of Chinese territory. The Chinese Communist Party has never ruled the island, but has long claimed it as its own. Beijing has never ruled out annexing the island by force. To counter China's threats from space, the U.S. has been collaborating with its close ally Japan to strengthen defenses on Earth and beyond. Here's the story.
A U.S. command post is getting set up in Japan, right on China's doorstep. The U.S. Space Force confirmed the plan after the two nations' space and air forces held their first talks in July. The command post will be the third U.S. Space Force base in the Indo-Pacific region, following two more openings in Hawaii and South Korea last year. According to military news outlet Stars and Stripes, Washington has already stationed military officers in Japan. The news comes alongside concerns about Chinese aggression in the region. China's Space Force is growing fast, armed with the globe's third largest space force, following the U.S. and Russia. Weichert is the author of Winning Space, How America Remains a Superpower.
They are still able to do things that we were not anticipating that they would be able to do, such as getting this new space station of theirs in orbit as quickly as they did, and getting many of our key allies to sign on in support of the new China space station. And that's just the beginning.
As for why it's significant for the U.S. to expand space efforts with its allies.
If you start marrying Russian and Chinese space power together to compete with the Americans directly in space, that's a whole new ballgame.
Experts say the U.S. command post in the Indo-Pacific would be able to counter the threats from China, Russia, and North Korea.
Former President Donald Trump is in Iowa, the first in the nation caucus state. He spoke to voters about his administration's achievements, including his dealing with the Chinese Communist Party and Russia. NTD's Daniel Monahan has more.
Remember I told you I made great deals. I don't even talk about China because of COVID, but I made one of the greatest deals ever with USMCA, but maybe the best was China. $50 billion, and remember it, and you had to stay with me. The farmers I'm talking about, mostly in this case, less the manufacturers. They were there anyway, but they were the most loyal people. The farmers were the most loyal people, and they said, sir, we're with you. I said, I'm going to get you all sorts of subsidies from China. They said, sir, we don't want subsidies. We just want a level playing field.
Issuing a warning of potential perils under Biden.
November of next year, we're like Wow, just a little bit more than a year. But a lot of bad things can happen in a year. Tremendously bad things can happen in a year. And a lot of stupid decisions can be made.
The former president naming his achievements in international diplomacy, including negotiations with Mexico over the wall, France over tariffs, and Putin over invading Ukraine.
And I used to talk to Putin about it. I'd say, you can't do it. You know, it was the apple of his eye, I will tell you. That I knew. But I made it the unapple of his eye because I said bad things are going to happen if you do that. And he didn't do it. He only started doing this after I was gone. All of a sudden you see troops building up. Would have never done it.
Iowa's in-person caucuses, which kick off the GOP's first statewide vote to select their next presidential nominee, will be held on January 15th of next year. Current polls show the former president with a commanding lead. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
More on the war between Russia and Ukraine. The European Council president on Wednesday called on China to help end the conflict. British Foreign Secretary James Cleverly urged his Chinese counterpart to do the same.
And I hope that he will impress upon Russia the complete inappropriateness of their action, and I hope that China will call for Russia to withdraw.
Cleverly made the statement Tuesday after Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi had arrived for a visit to Russia. China and Russia announced a no-limits partnership shortly before Russia invaded Ukraine in February of 2022. Beijing says the sovereignty and territorial integrity of all countries must be respected, though China abstained from all United Nations votes that demanded Moscow withdraw its troops from Ukraine. Germany is looking to reduce Chinese parts in its 5G technology. The country's ministry wants to remove Chinese vendors from providing critical components for Germany's core 5G networks and minimize disruptions along the way. What's more, they plan to reduce Chinese tech in other parts of the network by October 2026 for a maximum of 25%. At the same time, concerns about slowing digital growth are rising in the European Union. Currently, Huawei accounts for nearly 60% of Germany's 5G networks. The telecom system is a core part of how mobile devices connect to the network. The ministry wants to restrict the Chinese gear in sensitive regions, like the nation's capital, Berlin. The measures aim to limit the use of vendors considered high risk, including Huawei and ZTE, targeting concerns about potential sabotage or spying. The urgency comes as Germany's Interior Ministry hopes to avoid another Nord Stream pipeline situation. The lines were designed to bring Russian gas to Germany, but are no longer in use. More bad news for China's real estate sector. Chinese developer Sunac has filed for bankruptcy protection in a U.S. court. Court documents revealed the move Tuesday. The move will shield Sunac from its creditors, hoping to sue the company or tie up its assets in the United States. The company is in the midst of restructuring, a seemingly optimistic decision when creditors approved a $9 billion offshore debt restructuring plan on Monday. It marked the first green light for one of China's major indebted developers and sent the company's shares surging as much as 14% early on Tuesday. But the stock closed 4.3% down after reporters spotted the bankruptcy protection filing. Another of China's real estate giants, Evergrande, also sought bankruptcy protection, aiming to restructure its over $31 billion in debt. Sunac and Evergrande are two of several Chinese property developers that have defaulted on their offshore debt obligations in recent years, ever since the sector took a major pandemic-era hit in 2021. Another big story to look out for, more decoupling from China on Wall Street. A prominent American venture capital firm is planning to separate its business from the country. At the same time, it's using money raised from American pension funds to invest in Chinese AI and microchip companies. What role are U.S. politicians playing in the shift? Stay tuned for more coming up tomorrow on China in Focus. That's all for today's China in Focus on YouTube. We're now sharing a shortened version of our program here after being demonetized for 2 years. Here's what to look out for in our second half. A ban on Chinese app TikTok, blocking the app from governmental devices. More than half of all U.S. states are jumping on the bandwagon, all because of national security concerns. Though officials can use the app on their private devices. How safe or unsafe is the software really? We speak with Rex Lee, cybersecurity advisor at MySmart Privacy, for his take. The full episode is available on our partner platform, Epic TV. To sign up, click the link down below. Thanks for watching China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. See you tomorrow.